board has convened an executive session to consider matters relating to the appointment or employment of particular person or persons. And with that, I would like to call this meeting to order. And I would ask everyone to please rise as we say the pledge. And today we are most lucky to have a special guest, one of our students, Maddie Russo, who will be signing the pledge along with us. And I appreciate that. And everyone, here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. Um, with that, we normally have our report from our co-presidents of our SGO, at least one of whom is extremely involved with the play this weekend. You're in town, which I mentioned is Friday night. If you have bought your tickets, as well as Saturday matinee and a Saturday night show as well. And with that, we will move on to our student recognition. So I'll turn it over to our superintendent, Dr. Zulianos.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to see you all. So this evening we have some Science and Engineering Fair award winners and some athletic awards award winners as well. So we're going to move down by the podium and announce those winners and announce some recognitions. Since 1990, the Long Island Science and Engineering Fair has become an extremely successful and professional event. This year, 60 public schools and 6 private schools participated in the Round 1 2023 virtual event, which included 354 projects involving 410 students. Students from 33 public schools and 3 private schools advanced to the in-person Round 2, which included 83 projects involving 87 students. We are very excited and proud to announce that on March 7th, 2 North Shore juniors took home a 3rd place award in their individual categories. Michelle Yu, would you please come up? Michelle showed the decrease in reproductive fitness in marine tunicates as seawater salinity decreases in the result of climate change. Michelle, congratulations. Sophia Marchioli, would you please come up? Sophia explored how temperature and precipitation has changed in East Africa over the last 70 years and the implications on coffee production in that area. Well done. Congratulations, Michelle and Sophia. Matt Nakowitz, would you please come up? Matt is a busy man. I know he's going to be recognized somewhere else, I think, in a little bit. Matt bowled a perfect 300 game. He's the only bowler in Nassau County to get one this year. This is the first 300 game in North Shore history. Matthew, well done. And Matt. Would Sophia D'Amelio and Louisa Ludmore please come up? junior Sophia D'Amelio and sophomore Louisa Ludmore both had an amazing winter track and field season. They were both individual county champions. Louisa in the 1,500-meter race walk and Sophia in the pole vault. They both set school records in their events. In addition, they both qualified for the New York State Winter Track and Field Championship that was held at an Ocean Breeze Track and Field Center in Staten Island. Congratulations. Christos Vlahopoulos, Andrew Fabili, and Isaac Bratter, please come up. Congratulations to our wrestlers. Christos is not here this evening. Andrew Fabili is a nice Nassau County runner-up with an 18-9 record. Isaac Bratter, Nassau County runner-up 5-0 for team and conference matches. All three wrestlers competed in the New York State Championship in Albany. Congratulations, Andrew and Isaac. I must say, it's amazing to see students like Isaac and Sophia, who have known since they were in first or second grade, to be not only so accomplished, but much taller than me. Amazing work, guys. Congratulations. Colbert, would you please come up? So this is actually a basketball recognition for Kylie, who's also an amazing lacrosse player. Kylie Colbert is a senior, became our point guard this season for the first time in her career and had a remarkable season. She helped lead the Vikings to an undefeated conference championship and a 19-3 record overall. She was the unanimous choice for the Conference Player of the Year, was selected to the All-County team, was a BCNY All-Selection team, a BCNY Academic All-American, and a BCNY Top 50 selection, and is a finalist for All-State. She was also selected as the MVP at the Francis Lewis Showcase in December after she scored the winning layup with 3 seconds left. Congratulations on a great season, Kylie. Congratulations to all of our students. Job well done. Thank you. I pulled the 212 one. It's still on my fridge.
Okay. We will now move on to the approval of the minutes from March 9th. Sorry, not the approval, just the acceptance of them. Any questions or comments or any changes to the minutes? The only thing I'll say, Dr. Z, is our discussion about the faculty student basketball game. I'm glad it's now permanently in our district record, but you had a bad knee. That was the reason.
You can see it tonight. I swear I'm not faking it.
All right, being that there are no questions, we will consider them adopted. Thank you again, Betty. And we'll move on to action item 6, which is the approval of the treasurer's report from January of 2023. Is there a motion? Thank you, and I heard a second. Any comments or questions? I just had one, which is something I had asked of Mr. Pappas from central office, just that in light of some recent banking instability and failures of banks, I just wanted to confirm that all of the district's investments are obviously we're well beyond the FDIC 250 level, but we're all fully covered and guaranteed and nothing is in any way at risk.
That is correct. Yes, we're all collateralized with anything over and above the FDIC coverage.
Okay. And I appreciate that because you provided the backup as well. I also asked the follow-up question, which is there's really no cost for those guarantees and the letters of credit that are out there. It's
Dealing with governmental units, banks are required to, by general municipal law, to cover those deposits over and above.
Backup was so thorough and helpful. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. Other questions? All in favor? Aye. Action item 7, which is approval of the claims audit report, also for January of 23. Is there a motion and a second? Comments or questions?
A comment.
We don't want to make this.
Yeah, this is a great comment. It should be noted, very exciting, in the month of January 2023, there were 377 checks processed, and the invoice error percentage is 0%. So, not bad.
Almost $6 million worth of transactions. So it's your first perfect game, Jamie. So no.
Expect it every month now.
Yeah, that's your 300. Any other comments or questions? All right, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Action item 8, which is the approval of some budget transfers. Is there a motion? And I heard a second. Any comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Action item 9, which is the adoption of the 2023-2024 budget. Is there a motion? Thank you. Any comments or discussion or questions about this? Sure, Trustee Russo.
I want to thank Central Office for their hard work and putting together this budget and putting it out. I also want to note that I've received some questions about the 2% tax cap, and I just want to note that that is not a flat 2%. So when you see a number above 2%, it doesn't mean that we've exceeded the cap. We are actually under the cap. So I just wanted people to know that. I think some difficult decisions were made this year to keep us under the cap. I would anticipate that as the deficit grows between LIPA and the shifting of the tax, tax for what other things may be coming down the road, like TRS and ERS, that there'll be more difficult decisions to be made. I would hope that next year that we would start looking, we'd have some ideas at the very beginning of the year where you see some economies of scale. I mean, we've talked about some things in languages. We've talked about some of the duplicitous offerings at the high school that maybe, if we remove some of those, would actually open up opportunities for students. So we've talked about some of these things. So, maybe next year we could start. I mean, I know the budget, you're going to start, as soon as this one is passed, hopefully it will be passed, that you will start on building the next budget. So if we could have those conversations earlier in the year, now that, both of you have had a year to get adjusted. Well, actually, all three of you have had a year to get adjusted. That will have those, larger conversations maybe a little earlier in the year.
Thank you, Trustee Russo. Appreciate that. Other comments other trustees may have? Trustee Mosca?
Just I do want to echo what Trustee Russo said. I agree with just about everything. And a big thank you to our central administrators for really making some very tough decisions that, had to be made, unfortunately. But I did want to, and not to steal Dr. Z's thunder, but I did want to say that there's still a lot more to go until our vote, and that it's good that Marianne, you got questions, but I would encourage our public, our community, to be attending all the budget talks that I know Dr. Z and Mr. Pappas have a really robust schedule set up already. And our community budget forum has been a really interesting place to learn more as well, although we actually concluded, but for this year, I think. But anyway, I just want to, it's never too early, as Marianne just pointed out, to be having the conversations. So the more we hear from our community, the better we know what your needs are. So please keep coming to public comment too. I'm hoping all the people still sitting here are here for public comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Other comments from other trustees? I just had a couple, and I prepared them in advance, but Marianne and Maria really kind of said a lot of what I had to say. On behalf of the board, I want to thank the administration for offering this very well thought out approach to a very difficult year. You jumped right into the frying pan, and I look forward to voting to approve this budget in a few moments and to present it to the community for their referendum. I think it's a thoughtful approach that was not without difficulty, not just for 23-24, which is, of course, the year that we'll be funding, but also for years forward, for 24-25 and beyond. 24-25 is probably going to be the most precipitous drop from the lack of LIPA payments in terms of per year dollars, and this, I hope, sets us up for that next step, which is important. I want to thank the past Board of Educations who've been here before us, who knew these challenges were coming for nigh a decade, and that this challenge would be hitting us at our doorstep in the way that it has. They made forward-thinking decisions, managed our reserves wisely, and always kept this place a student-centered organization. I want to thank my fellow trustees very much for pouring over this in detail. It's not always resulting in short meetings, but I think the detail is good. It helped make me a better trustee and understand what we're doing better in the public, transparent way that you've all really upheld your oath to represent this community, and I really appreciate that. You all serve this district with honor, and I appreciate it. And finally, I just want to say, really echoing what Maria just said, some people vote yes or no on these every year, but I would hope that most people, if they have questions, would try to get those questions answered by attending some meetings, by looking at our videos. Dr. Z, I hope it's okay, but it's Zublionis at northshoreschools.org.
Absolutely.
He gets those, he answers those emails. And for everyone, please, no matter what you feel about the schools, the district, and everything else, the more people that vote, the better. That's the purpose of why we do all of this, why we have elections. It's May 16th at the high school library between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. Or high school gym. What did I say? High school lobby? Library. Oh, yeah, there isn't. Sorry.
That's positive thinking.
Sorry.
The library will be down by the budget vote.
Thank you all.
We have enough.
The high school gym, May 16th between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. Are there any other questions before I call the vote? Okay, all in favor of adopting the 23-24 budget as presented? Aye. Thank you. We will now move on to action item 10. And with this, when I ask for the motion, I would like to read just a little bit of the substantial portion of the language that's in the resolution itself, because I think this is a kind of a tricky one, and I want to make sure that we're all clear, but I want to make sure it's clear for those watching on video and those who are here. And the way that the resolution is written, I was trying to think of a way to summarize it, and then when I read this in our backup, I realized it's actually pretty clear and straightforward the way it is. So I would like to ask for a motion for the board of the North Shore School Central Schools, which has determined that there is a need to amend the scope of the existing 2016 Capital Reserve Fund to include the removal and replacement of turf fields at the district school facilities, and, subject to that approval, to expend available funds from the 2016 Capital Reserve for A, the removal and replacement of the turf field at the high school, and B, the renovation and construction of a dedicated dance classroom at the North Shore High School. And whereas the board desires the propositions be presented to the voters of the school district, it is therefore resolved that the board hereby authorizes and directs that the following propositions be placed before the voters of the North Shore schools at our annual vote. Again, May 16th, high school gym between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. Proposition 2. Proposition 1, by the way, is of course the budget that we just put forth to do. Proposition 2 is a capital reserve fund amendment proposition that the board of the North Shore schools is hereby authorized to amend that 2016 capital reserve, which was established by voter authorization in May of 2016, by expanding its scope to include, for the purposes previously established, the accumulation of funds for the purpose of financing the removal and replacement of turf fields at the district school facilities without any change, increase, or alteration to the fund's source of funding, ultimate capitalized amount, or maximum annual funding allocation, which shall remain as previously authorized in amendment by district voters. And then Proposition 3 is a capital reserve fund expenditure proposition. And I won't read this whole, I'll just synopsize this one very, very cleanly. That once we add the turf field to Proposition 2, we will then ask the community to vote to expend funds that are already in there on replacement of the turf field and renovation of that dance class so our dance students have a place to dance and learn and express themselves. So that's what we're doing. On all that I've just said there, is it a motion to open discussion? Thank you. And that's a second as well. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Chris and Jamie, who I now fear, I hope I didn't take away anything you had planned. Thank you.
It's actually the perfect segue. Thank you so much. So Mr. Pappas and I are just going to go down and present for a few minutes again, just a breakdown of the capital reserve propositions. And we call this Capital Reserve 2023. What and why?
Trustees, I think have a pretty good hold on this. We can hang out here, or you go down, whatever you prefer.
And we do have the printed out version at the table. So I always say when we start these presentations that Mr. Pappas can interrupt me, but he's too much of a gentleman. But I'm going to say, please interrupt me because we have worked hard on this for a long period of time. It is hard to believe that we really started this process about a year ago when I found out that I would be in this position. Mr. Pappas wasn't here, but I started thinking about how we were going to make it all work. And I think that's the challenge of this year. And I really appreciate the trustees' comments about the multi-year approach to this budget. I know that when folks look at the propositions and look at the budget and the tax levy, some folks might be more or less happy with that. And I totally understand and respect that. The one thing I do want to echo is that we are looking at this over the course of time and throughout, really trying to balance the interests of residents and the needs of our students and the special programming that we've always offered here at North Shore, while taking a fresh look, like Trustee Russo had said, and Mr. Lumar, that we want to take a new look and find efficiencies in that manner also, so that we find new opportunities. One challenge that we faced outside of LIPA and outside of the increasing costs that we faced this year was the need to replace, at that very same time, our high school turf field. As some of you know, we are nearing the end of the useful life of the high school turf field. At the same time, we've been growing our dance program. The interest in our dance program has grown tremendously, and you're seeing that in the numbers at the middle school level. And so we needed to see if we could find a way to fund these projects because they are time sensitive. when we began the budget planning process, we had a very clear goal, and that goal was 0% tax levy increase, and turf field and dance studio, and the continuation of all our programming. That goal was seemingly attainable until we started to rack in our costs on healthcare and benefits and debt service, and it became very clear that that was going to be much more of a challenge than we thought. As a result, we needed to think outside of the box and think of a way that we could fund these projects with money that we already had that would not incur additional burdens on our taxpayers. Therein enter the 2016 capital reserve and how we could utilize that funding that we already have. So we wanted to start just by briefly talking again about what is a capital reserve. In essence, a savings account to put funds aside to cover all or part of a larger capital improvement. The capital improvement is an upgrade to a building, an infrastructure project. In this case, we're talking about the update of a classroom to make it into a dance studio and the replacement of a turf field. Voters must approve the creation of this capital reserve with a specific list of projects, and this was done in 2016. And then voters must also separately approve the use of the funds in that reserve, and that was done in 2018 and 2020. Why do school districts do this? Why don't they just do this as part of their budget? And I should also mention at this time that part of these projects will be funded if the budget is approved. There is $350,000 allocated in the budget towards the turf field and dance studio projects. We are also counting on a grant from legislator Lapizan in Nassau County, which we're very appreciative of, that will also contribute. But the capital reserve and having that money there allows communities to put money aside for needed capital projects that are hard to afford in any one single budget year. It allows districts to use the money that they already have at no additional expense to the taxpayer in that year that they're spending it. And it prevents capital projects from causing budget spikes in any single year. So the way we think about this in the context of the turf field and the dance studio is we really couldn't have put those into our budget, and we tried. We already do have a tax levy that's under the cap, but is significant, and we're aware of that. So to try and put the turf field and the dance studio into the budget, it would have made that burden on our residents and our budget-to-budget increase that much larger. We knew that wasn't feasible. And so we looked at this 2016 capital reserve. We currently have enough money in that capital reserve that in conjunction with the budgeted amount of $350,000 would allow us to complete the replacement of the turf field and the upgrade of the classroom into a dance studio. The North Shore Central Schools established capital reserve in 2016 with voter approval. Most of the projects on the list are completed and funds remain. There are approximately $1.9 million remaining in the reserve. This includes funds previously allocated to projects that have been completed and will be transferred back into the reserve, namely the middle school locker rooms and the Glen Head Nurses Suite. Thank you, Jane. What we are asking, what the district is asking and proposing to the board to ask the community is the amendment of the capital reserve and the original list of projects to include the replacement of the turf field. Proposition 2. So Proposition 2 is stating, as Mr. Lundmar read, the amendment of that original project list from 2016 to now include the turf fields. The district is then asking voters to expend funds already in the capital reserve to replace the high school turf field and complete the classroom renovations for a dance studio. So this is Proposition 3, is to actually use the money that's in there. So first we need to amend Proposition 2 to include all the projects, and then expend Proposition 3 to use those funds to do those projects as quickly as possible. And of course, we're in North Shore, very philosophical. We always ask the why. Why are we doing this? Do we have a rationale? The most important question. The North Shore High School turf field is near the end of its useful life. The dance program is growing and students need a dedicated space. And so all of these needs are really driven by students, But also our turf field is used by the community. We want to make sure it's in good shape so it serves that purpose that it has for the last decade. So the question remains, why are we doing this in the vehicle of a capital reserve? And again, why not in our budget? As I've communicated, as Mr. Pappas and I have communicated in our meetings, in our email communication, social media, we faced a unique gap this year. So without any increased costs, we started the year $3.5 million below where we started last year in terms of revenue. That is accounted for by the LIPA loss of revenue, 2.35 million, and a loss of grant money that was fully used last year, 1.15 million, to get us to 3.5 million, kind of in the hole when we started this year. So even if we had a flat budget, zero increase, we would have to find 3.5 million to stay at where we currently were. Which that's what our modeling really revolved around this summer, is how we were going to do that. We knew there would be budget to budget increases. There always are. There are contractual salary increases, other typical increases. We were not expecting the level of, like I've said, health insurance increase, benefits increase, and debt service increase, interest rate increase. And so when you combine the $7.1 million in cost increase with the $3.5 million in loss of revenue, that gives you a $10.6 million gap that we were trying to mine. And the high school turf field and dance studio couldn't fit into the budget with that amount of budget pressure. And it would significantly increase the budget and taxes as well. So we feel that this is a creative solution that allows us to accomplish this much needed goal without putting it on the backs of taxpayers. So that is our very brief overview of the capital reserve. Proposition 2, amend. Proposition 3, expend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Pappas and Dr. Zublionis. I will now turn it over to the trustees if you have any questions about either that presentation or about the proposition in general. Sure, please.
I want to thank the administration for putting forward such a creative way to overcome an obstacle that this community has faced. The community was offered an opportunity to create a capital reserve a couple of years ago with the express, where articulated in the cap reserve was the replacement of a field that we knew, the turf field, was nearing the end of its life. So it's even closer now than it was then. And this is a really creative way to use capital that is existing. It's worth noting that because of so much work going on in the district and the bond, that things were funded in different ways that were named in that cap reserve. So it's not a matter of ignoring, although it is a reprioritization to some degree. There aren't necessarily missing or redlined items from the existing cap reserve that were high priorities to do it this way. So I think that this is a great opportunity for the community. It meets the need that we've heard casually of spending money that we have, and I'm really excited to vote yes for adding this to the ballot.
Thank you, Trustee Cashman. Other trustee comments before we call the vote?
Just going to say, anytime we're deciding where money goes, the idea that we're considering student voice in that, I think, is really important. And the idea that the two projects named were picked in part because of student demand, right? One, a long-standing program, and two, a new program that's expanding. And I think that's really exciting because it shows that we are committed to our traditional programs as well as continuing, right, to expand what we have to offer here. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice President McCary. Are there other comments? Okay, trustees, I will call the vote. All in favor of putting these two propositions on the ballot? Aye. Thank you very much. And we will now move on to, we'll take a deep breath and then give the report from our superintendent, Dr. Zublianis. Take it away.
Thank you so much. I'll kind of transition out of the capital reserve discussion. One thing I failed to mention is, with any projects that are on that list, we do believe enough funds will come back even after the turf and the dance studio project, where we can really address those most needed projects. But then it will be another time. This is an ongoing process for a decision. Do we continue to fund that capital reserve? Do we create a new capital reserve? And the budgeting picture at that time and the input of the community, will shape those decisions and the board discussion. So thank you so much. Samantha's not here this evening, but I did want to share an update on the high school library that we received this week. Thank you, Mr. Pappas and Mr. Hall, for your support in a meeting this week. We got a good indicator, but we're always very cautious with construction updates that by late April, we should see significant progress in the high school library. And so we will continue to update with more specificity. We're not sure if that means that it will be in use this year, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done to relocate the books back to that library, but we thought that was a very positive update. So we're transitioning out of our middle school winter 2 sports season, which we had some games today. Middle school students will begin their spring season on Monday, and there will be a virtual meeting for all parents of middle school spring athletes on Wednesday of next week at 7 p.m. A meeting link will be emailed the morning of the meeting. And we're already in full swing in terms of JV and varsity sports at the high school. And we will have some action tomorrow. We have a JV game tomorrow away at Flora Park, a varsity baseball scrimmage at Oyster Bay tomorrow, JV girls lacrosse at Kellenberg on Saturday, a JV baseball scrimmage at home on Saturday, varsity girls lacrosse away at Kellenberg. Believe it or not, also on Saturday we will have lacrosse, boys lacrosse varsity here at 11 a.m., JV at Calhoun that same day, and we'll have a baseball scrimmage against Manhasset at 8 a.m. on Saturday morning and 10 a.m. For JV. We're really excited about this upcoming season to get back outdoors, and I look forward to seeing you all in the fields. On the musical and the arts front, we have a very exciting weekend. This weekend, tomorrow, is the opening night of the high school musical Urinetown. And that will be at 7:30 p.m. Saturday, matinee at 2 p.m., evening show at 7:30 p.m. And I look forward to seeing you all there for those who are going on Saturday evening. Our middle school, high school jazz concert will take place on Tuesday, April 4th at 7 p.m. And our dance symposium, led by Ms. Kuranishi, will take place in the high school theater on Friday, April 21st at 7 p.m. We're very excited for that. I just wanted to announce a few changes to the Board of Ed calendar for discussion topics. We will be talking about the transition process for students at the end of the year at our June 8th meeting. And instead, on April 20th, we will have a discussion of 2 smaller items: the reorganization of district committees. The board had asked me to look at our district committees, and we've been getting feedback in our meetings of those different committees. For example, we met with Athletic Advisory this past week, and we got some input from the committee members about what they'd like to see, changes. So this is a great opportunity. And I think it really syncs with the discussion which was moved to May 25th on the strategic plan and the North Shore Journey, because really those overall goals, those ongoing goals, and the year-to-year board goals are supported by the work of our committees to make sure that we have a full 360 of our community in shaping the work that we're doing to support those goals. So look forward to those upcoming presentations. And as Trustee Mosca had mentioned, we'll have some upcoming budget talks. We'll be sending out the calendar shortly, but I did want to mention Monday, April 3rd at 7 p.m. in the high school cafeteria. We will be having our first budget talk. Then we'll be going out to the community, and I want to thank Pezzi Pizza and the Gold Coast Library
Carlos Pizza, the Seacliff Village Library, Gemelli Market, for all of your help in securing some times to speak to community members. And then we'll be meeting with our PTOs, our SCAs and PCA, and then also the Booster Club and SEPTA. So we look forward to those meetings. You'll be hearing shortly, I know I've mentioned this before, in between those budget talks, discussions about the North Shore Journey. We want to get another round of feedback. We'll be meeting with parents by appointment, and we're also going to be meeting with some students. I was in the middle school today. Saw some Seacliff students that I'd once had a few years ago, but other students as well. And I'm really excited for Dr. Smythe and I and the principals to meet with students and get feedback on our goals as a district. And finally, I want to thank CASA for all their hard work, their ongoing work. They had supported the Chris Herron presentation in February, and they do have a very educative presentation next Wednesday, March 29th at 7 p.m. in the middle school library called Let's Talk About Cannabis. One thing that Ms. Camardella had brought up at the Chris Herron presentation is that with the laws changing, the landscape of substance abuse in this area has changed. It's really important. They have a lot of great information. You'll notice up in our buildings when you come into the concerts, you're going to see CASA posters with QR codes where you can get quick information. We're going to be emailing that out as well. And we really, really value their partnership. Mr. Darden and I met with some members of the CASA board the other day, and they're just so excited to continue to help the district and just to directly serve our children. And I had one more, speaking of our youngest students, one more update on UPK. Preparing still for next year. Ms. Miller, our registrar, informed me yesterday that we have 97 registrants for the pre-K program. Our goal is to find seats not only in the SCOPE program in North Shore, but also in other participating pre-Ks in the community, so that the lottery can be as much as possible a matter of preference of location versus getting a seat. So we're working on that. I'm in talks with different pre-Ks in the community who are willing to work with us, and we're excited for that. And I'll continue to update the board and the community. We have gotten some questions on lottery. It will take place during the last week of April, and the registration will close on April 5th. And if you are registered, you'll be in that lottery, and we'll be sending more specific information to those families that are registered after the April break. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dr. Zublionis. We're going to segue right away to the regular business portion of our meeting for our discussion of policy review. Policy committee has been very busy at work reviewing many of our policies, which we review in a multi-year cycle, going through one section at a time. And we haven't had an opportunity to go through those publicly, so we saved that for tonight, where we're going to go through a few. Maria, you're leading?
Sure. Just briefly, we're presenting 5 policies tonight. The first 2 are election policies that you will notice they appear to be taken out of order. We've gotten used to doing that, but just kidding. But we actually would have originally expected to be reviewing them by this election season anyway, so we wanted to get them in there. They have some additional language added by our general counsel. And like every policy we review, we've cleaned up the grammar and sometimes awkward sentence structure.
Very good at that.
Yeah, we're very, very good at that.
That's why it takes us so long.
Lisa, got a funny comment?
Some of us less better than others.
The other 3 that go as a group are actually part of our regularly scheduled programming. Again, we've done a lot of grammar and sentence structure changes, but also made some language changes to clarify the procedures, the regulation, and the exhibit, which is the actual form used to register concerns about instructional materials. So for your reading pleasure.
Thank you. Should we maybe group them? So any questions or comments on 2120 and 2120.2 first? That sound good? Please, Trustee Colciop.
First of all, thank you to the policy committee. I thought you guys did an excellent job. I don't have much to say, but there was the second full paragraph of 2120, the term of office. I was just curious, this is more of a question. It says the term of office of a trustee is elected July 1st and then shall expire on the 30th of June. do we need to say that it's a 3-year term? Because it almost looks like it's a 1-year term.
That's exactly that same question.
I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we missed that. Thank you very much.
Busy with the Oxford comma.
Yeah, right.
Other 2120 and 2120.2?
Just to make the point, though, this is why we do 2 readings. Thank you.
I do have a comment on 2120.2, unless anyone else had a comment on it.
No, go for it. I'm sorry, Rich, please.
I'm just wondering, what was the rationale for changing the wording to July 1st from the way that it was? I'm just curious. I'm not
It
opposed
was.
to it. I was just curious why.
I wondered if anyone would ask about that. And, you know, we do talk a lot in these meetings. We debate things a whole lot, don't we? And we just thought it was clearer. We just wanted to be a little more concise and a little bit less legalese without sacrificing any legality.
Trustee is not sworn in on July 1 necessarily. So if a trustee is not sworn in, if you haven't had your reorg meeting and a trustee is not sworn in, they cannot act on July 1. You would have to wait to the reorg meeting. A trustee
That
does continue their term to June 30th, whether we have a meeting or not, because things may come up and you may have special meetings, but a trustee cannot act prior to being sworn in.
right, and I think the following 2 or 3 sentences actually address that. Newly elected board trustees shall be sworn in at the board's annual organizational meeting or as soon thereafter as practicable.
Right,
And
but their term doesn't begin until they're sworn in.
okay, all right, we can modify that as needed.
We'll check. I mean, Marion certainly is correct. And it does say after that if you're, which I thought of it in a different way, which is that any trustee whose term of office has expired shall hold over and continue to discharge duties of office until a successor trustee has duly qualified to serve, which I don't know that it's ever happened, but it is possible. We don't have enough candidates, people don't fill, or
Actually, that's the reason I asked it is because my recollection, it did happen once where we had some discussions prior to the reorg meeting that we needed action on, and we needed to bring the former trustee involved, into the discussion. That was the only reason why I asked this.
sounds like maybe we just run this by council and have them just give us a quick, there's
Yeah.
got to be some best practice wording on this.
That's what I was going to say. And some of these changes were given to us by council, so we'll see how that merges with the other feedback.
Thanks, Rich, and committee, of course. Other questions on this? The thing I noticed was an explicit statement that election signs on school property are not allowed and will be removed. I like that that's in there and it's clear for everyone. Certainly, this town gets plenty of notice when it's election time. I think when the kids go to school, they can be free from that. So that's a nice improvement.
You have to
Yeah.
define what school property is, right? So, if someone posted on a telephone pole, it's not school property.
Other comments on 2120? Okay, the 1420.
Okay,
Troy.
I'm sorry. I had
Lisa
21,
had another one.
21, 20.2. This is
Point
just,
two.
this is also kind of nitpicky and really more of a question, but in the first paragraph under voting, the second sentence, exceptions to the use of voting machines shall be an emergency situation whereby the machines are unavailable or are unavailable due to mechanical failure or the unavailable or unavailable. I don't know. I mean, it might be fine, but I just wanted to raise it.
So you need to join the policy
I
committee
had that
next
same
year.
thought. But that same sentence though, exceptions is plural, right? So then it should be, shall be emergency situations, like plural, right? Exceptions to the use of voting machines shall be an emergency situation.
I thought what it was
Yeah.
saying was that the first one was when, instead of saying whether machines are unavailable, I interpreted it as where the machines cannot be obtained.
Yeah.
Or if you get there and suddenly they go on the fritz.
Two different kinds of unavailability.
I mean, we all saw it during the pandemic, things were hard to get, and there was, so,
So, yeah, what is the, we can craft that sentence better if you, I mean, should we, policy committee take another crack at it and distribute, or?
Yeah, we could reword it.
for a second reading, it's perfect. Look both ways before I give up on 2120. Okay, the 31420s. Please.
So this is a very high level comment in terms of taking them all together. So you have a situation where a parent expresses concerns about materials, and they're different. There's regulation implementing how those concerns are addressed. And when you get to the end of it, right? So you could have these meetings on it. There could be a committee on the convened on the concern to address the concern. My question is not so much for a library book. If at the end of the day, the superintendent makes a determination, which is within their right, while the process is going on, if the material is like a curriculum material or a required reading, what do you do during the process? Is there like we would call it a stay in the legal world, is the material held in abeyance? What do you do? Because there's now been a challenge, a concern to the materials. This seems like could be quite a long process. What happens?
That's an excellent question that we did not explore. I would want to look at, is there any legal guidance on that, commissioner's decisions? I'd also want to see.
The last sentence of
Oh, I'm
1420.
wrong. Sorry.
I think we did talk about this. The last sentence of 1420 is that until a decision is rendered, the material remains available to staff and
Okay.
students.
Which I do think is how it, and I'm actually trying to remember my research a year ago,
Yeah.
but that is how it went in the Island Trees process. While that suit was going on, the material, the lower court, I think, had said the material stays available.
Okay, so now that sort of leads me into the next question, right? So if you go through the process, or let's say while the process is going on and a decision has not been made on the material, what options do we offer the parent? So if someone doesn't want to take the state exams, they have an opt-out, right? They can opt out of the material. We even tell them how to do it, right? So now a parent is challenging the material. If it's a library book, they have the option of just telling their child not to take out the library book. But if it is something required and the material is available is different than continue with the instruction, right? Available is a very different word than being taught in the classroom, than being required to be read. Do we offer a different material for the student or an opt-out? I mean, it seems to me that now the parent has gone to all this trouble and they may be faced with a situation where they don't think their child is mature enough for the material, or they think that perhaps this is something that they would like to control the presentation of the content. I mean, this comes in all different ways. So when we decided to make algebra required in 8th grade, I went to board meetings and I said, this is not for every student. Not every student is mature enough or ready to have algebra and 8th grade. And what we saw was down the road, it really had a negative impact for those students who were forced to do it both in understanding math and in their test scores. So now we have an option for parents to put their kid their child in 8th grade math if they don't think their child is ready for that sort of complex material. So now you have a situation where a parent may think their child is not ready, is not mature enough, because we all know children mature at different rates. Some kids read at 4 and some kids read at 6, right? It's developmental, and every child develops differently. So what do we do to accommodate the parent and the student?
It is, as you kind of mentioned, it's so dependent on the specific situation. And sometimes it's very easy, like if we're talking about, book clubs or books where they're a choice or the nature of the activity, it's just very easy to find another choice. When it comes to programming, like when we talk about like maturity programming or vaping presentations or things like that, there are options that we can provide. Ways where we can, make sure that material is given to parents in advance so that they can, make an educated choice. So that is an excellent question, but one that's hard to answer, I think, in a blanket way because it's so specific to what we're talking about.
But you could put in that regulation that after going through the committee, if the superintendent determines that the material should be kept, that the district would endeavor to accommodate the 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 the, the, the parent, the concern raised by the parent. I mean, you could put that in a regulation. We mail out to people the option of, okay, you don't think your kid's ready to take a state test? Here you go. Here's how you get out of it. Don't have your child take it. I mean, and that's a state mandated test. Now you're talking about potentially discretionary reading, discretionary curriculum, right? And you're not providing in this regulation any accommodation to the parent who disagrees with the superintendent's determination.
And I think we'll definitely look at this in our next read in the policy committee. I know there is some educational law on this that I just, we want to look at and we'll share with the board about opting out of mandated curriculum. I think one thing that's interesting about the state test, and I totally understand the point that you're making, is that, and this is the point I think that people who opt out of tests will make. It's the state, like imposing something on schools. Versus a curriculum that we, locally determine and approve. Functionally the same thing and the same principle. I understand what you're saying. So we'll definitely look at that in policy committee.
I'm not, just let me finish my thought. Because I want to respond.
Oh, sure.
So I'm not arguing that children should have to take state tests. I'm just saying that we have we do something to accommodate that concern. So you are, in a way, if you want to use the public schools as you are entitled to with your tax dollars, you are mandating a curriculum on parents who may disagree without any effort to accommodate in this regulation. That's my point. So it is mandated, whether it's mandated at the local level or the state level, you are pushing the curriculum on the student and the parent. Right? So I could make the same argument as state testing with this, right? Because it's one way or another, it's being mandated and pushed on the student. So, and part of it does come from the state when you're talking about certain curriculum.
That's true.
So I still say if we can accommodate everyone else, we should be able to accommodate a parent that has a concern.
So I'm just curious, Chris, past practice, the district, the teachers normally work with the parents in these situations?
Yeah, and I think, most of the situations that arise, we do try to do, I think what we're talking about, that accommodation early on, and find it. I think there are situations where there are parts of curriculum that are essential, or what the educators, the administrators, and teachers deem are essential, but there are a lot of parts that are easier to accommodate and provide choice and things like that. So we do try to do that earlier on in the like that informal part where the concerns first raised.
And I think my fellow trustees on the policy committee, I think we really spent a lot of time talking about sort of the nature of this and having it be a conversation, one where all stakeholders are able to sort of aim to come to some type of like shared understanding, versus a material being sort of put on trial, right? Is that your sense, or that?
I would say,
I was,
oh, that you were asking me.
oh no, go ahead. I was,
Who are you asking?
oh, the trustees.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Characterization of our conversation, yes.
I think also something's missing from the conversation in terms of how this regulation is being characterized, because it was our understanding that in most cases that there would be huge accommodations and efforts being made informally, that this provides an escalation path, and we sort of went through a lot of different machinations of everything from the propriety of a physical activity to an experience to like we
Math
really
problem.
we really thought of lots of different ways that kids could be there could be a disconnect, and so that we wanted to provide an escalation path. And so also characterizing that they don't have a voice is not how I see it, in that we in particular left in as the last escalation path the ability to approach the board if they are unsatisfied with the decision of the superintendent. And ostensibly we represent the community, so there is there is more voice provided through the regulation than I think is being characterized by what's going on. And also there are limits within a public school system.
I didn't say voice. What I said is this regulation does not specifically delineate what kind of accommodation can be made to a parent. I didn't say they didn't have a voice. So don't mischaracterize what I'm saying.
Well, I think that for me, in looking at this, to Andrea's point, one of the things that I was going to comment was that I love the first part, which is the goal of these conversations, which I think is something we can all agree with, is to do our best to resolve this informally through discussions and understanding. And I think that is something that is practical and reasonable and also very North Shore. And it's a recognition that parents should be engaged in the learning of their kids. There should be open communication between what goes on in our schools, what parents are aware of, what students are doing. And they should all come together. So when there's a problem, that first line of defense, or that first line of engagement is a much better word than defense, is to have the parent and or parents and or guardians come to the school and communicate with the teacher and the building leader to talk about what those things are. I think for me, the classic example that I always thought about growing up was people who didn't, for whatever reason, didn't feel comfortable dissecting the frog, right? That was the one, a pretty classic example.
Talked about that one actually.
And
Yeah.
so for those, traditionally, I remember being in high school and there was a student in my science class who, it was not something that they were comfortable doing. And that person got an alternative assignment. And I would think that would be a good solution. But to Marianne's point, I think is also very, very well taken. The purpose of us doing this is to provide a clear path of what we do. I am aware of a school district in Westchester that, due to a series of parent complaints and back and forths, that literally in the middle of the day, the administration went into classrooms where the book was being taught. I don't know if you've heard about this, and took the book out of kids' hands while they were actually doing it. And it was chaos, of course, and it was a tremendous upheaval to the students, to the administration. People left the district, teachers left the district. It was. You don't want it to get to that point, Marianne. I think your point is, if you have an explicit regulation, that creates a path for what you do in those situations, then you don't have that chaos. And if it can be done in a way that brings people and parents and schools together, so much the better.
Thought about as to what alternative that would be put in writing that in the regulations that should the parents still be dissatisfied with the determination and have concerns that every effort will be made by the district to accommodate the parent and the student. That's all I'm asking.
So I think that's fair and fair to be considered by the policy committee, which will bring forward their recommendation to us. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I have after this conversation, a very boring comment. On 1420R, it says any textbook, library book material. Library book material? Is that a thing? It used to say library book or material, and you took out or.
Library book, comma, material, comma,
Should be a
or-
comma there, yeah. I'm sorry, that's
or any other.
Marion's comment was very high level. That's kind of on the more mundane, but important.
we'll fix that.
Thank you, Lisa. Other comments?
Sorry, the risk of, I didn't want to open the whole can of worms again, but I wanted to clarify what I want to be certain that I understand what Marianne is asking. So in item number 2 of the regulation, we do say if the concern is not resolved informally, the concerned party may file a formal blah, 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 and we go on and we define this whole process. And you're saying that at the end of the entire process, going all the way through the superintendent and possibly even an appeal to the board, if they're still unhappy, there should be something in writing.
Writing that the district will make every effort to accommodate the student. You can put in the student, I don't know that you could put in an opt-out option right here, but you could keep the language broad enough, but give some reassurance to the parent that filed the concern. Because what's going to happen, I'm going to tell you right now, if I'm a parent and I go through this whole process and the superintendent says, okay, for this reason, which may be a very sound reason, we want to keep this in the curriculum, and the parent is still unhappy, they are going to feel unheard, right? So unless you make some effort at the end and say, look, this is what we have to do. I get the whole thing about library books, about having books that students identify with, that have all sorts of characters that they identify with. I think it's important for students to have that. But I also think it's important for parents when they feel that, and I know for a fact there are parents out there, not just in this district, in every district, that feel that the content that has been being pushed down, I would say both from an academic as well as a social and emotional and a DEI perspective. I think some of that material they feel is just too mature and sophisticated for their child. And it seems that sort of content is coming down younger and younger and younger. I would say, I'm appalled that, now kids have to read and write in kindergarten. I just think reading is developmental. And I had 2 very different experiences with my own children. I'm sure any teacher would tell you that when they have 25 kids in the class, they don't all learn to read at the same time, right? So that's what I'm saying. I think there is a feeling that kids are not being allowed to be kids, right? There's not enough recreation time. The content is getting very mature. And I just think that, especially at the younger levels, that we really need to make some effort to accommodate the parents. And when we don't do that and they feel like they're not being heard, what you get is you get people angry, right? And that's not what we want. I just want a simple paragraph that says we will make every effort to accommodate the parental concern. Not that big a deal.
That too also include legal counsel and understanding the limits in terms of our ability to accommodate within the context of public school. Like if it is as simple as I mean, I think we do as a district, we are so every child focused, and I think that's just part of our, like, what makes us us, which I haven't said in a while. I think that, you know, it is part of the DNA in every building to try and accommodate each child and each family and see each learner as individuals. I have no problem with including language in the regulation that does that, but I do also see our fidelity to a process as being very important, and professional educators being having guardrails as to what will be taught. So I would like to know the legal implications.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think, well, your points are well taken, Marion. I think the one part that I would disagree with is the idea that it's just a simple paragraph. I think the idea of what the curriculum is something that should be involving communities and should be involving parents and families. But I also know that we do have an obligation to some degree to be teaching our kids. And so the line between parents choosing curriculum based on their beliefs entirely versus what the district feels is just not simple.
I didn't say they were choosing the curriculum. I said you were going to accommodate them and maybe give them a different pathway or option. That is very different than saying that the parents are choosing the curriculum.
When it is not simple. That is my feeling. So we can disagree, but I don't think that it's as simple as, well, if they don't like it, let's just have a paragraph that says they can then choose something else.
I didn't say that. I said the district would make every effort to accommodate the parental concern. I didn't guarantee anything. I actually really know how to draft things because I do it for a living. Been doing it for 35 years.
I have a question. So
Lisa,
in that first paragraph, which you already touched upon, but that first paragraph to me kind of does that. It talks about trying to find a mutual understanding both perspectives. So I'm going to ask you, Marion. So you think that first paragraph is not?
I think it doesn't
Not clear
address. It
enough?
doesn't address that when you get to the end of the process and a parent is still not satisfied, it doesn't assure the parent that the district will try and accommodate the child. It's just a paragraph that says the district will make every effort to accommodate the parental concern.
You don't
So,
see how that could potentially open up a giant can of worms?
it's not a promise. It's not a promise that they will win. It's a promise that we'll try and accommodate them. Listen, if we can send out mailers telling people how to opt out of a state mandated test, we can make an effort to accommodate what is a concern in this community about the content of curriculum, especially at the elementary level.
I would say the distinction between learning and an examination is an important distinction. An examination is feedback on what you've already learned. It's very different to say that mechanism of feedback is something that parents may choose not to do, as opposed to parents choosing to say that I'm going to finish, Marion.
I'm listening.
It's very different from them saying that they don't want to learn it at all. Obviously, parents have the right not to subject their children to things that they find objectionable. And the schools are not places that should be forcing kids to do things that their family, that simply violates their values. That's not a position the school should be in. So I understand the point you're making, that it should be that not just at the beginning of the process with the informal discussions to try to reach understanding, but also with the end when these very clear steps have been brought all the way to their natural conclusion. And so it goes through these steps, and the board that does, as Lisa Cashman said, does represent the community, makes a determination on the appropriateness of that based on the objection. That if that is not to the parents' liking, I do agree with you. There should be some mechanism to continue working with them. I just think that what that looks like and the specific language can be fraught and needs to be done with tremendous delicacy with the input of counsel as well. But the general principle you have behind it, which is continuing to work with the family, I'm behind that. Sure.
Not kid yourself that the point behind the opt-out movement was to change the curriculum. It was. It was to change the curriculum.
I don't.
And so I think.
But that's not. I mean,
and we're providing a pathway for that by giving them instructions on how to opt out. Now, what I'm saying to you is that some of this curriculum is discretionary. It's not all state mandated. It's not all locally mandated. Some of it is discretionary. And it's not just the content, it is the delivery. And who is giving that information to the student? Because everyone, when they deliver a message, delivers it differently. So there is tone, there is inflection, and maybe some parents want to control the delivery of the content. Now, I don't think any parent in this district would want any child to feel unwelcome. I don't think any parent in this district would want any child to be bullied. I think we can teach a lot of things in a lot of ways. So there are different ways to teach it and different ways to deliver it. And maybe what needs to be done is to have a different pathway for different students, just like we provide different learning pathways for students with learning disabilities, just like we provide different pathways for parents who object to a state mandated test. There are a lot of different things that can come up. I just think that we should continue the conversation, and that's what I think. And I think there should be some effort to accommodate the parent. And I would like it clearly articulated in this policy that we will continue to do that so that parents don't feel like their concerns are not being met.
I just wanted to say separately from the policy discussion, just take a second to say Carol and I do, and this is again not to take away from the specific policy discussion, but we do try to work towards that in a proactive manner. We spend a lot of time with parents talking about concerns that they've had, and we do take that in as we supervise the curriculum and as a part of our normal responsibility. So we do hear concerns. We do try to maintain that open dialogue. Both Carol and I together separately have met with parents, and we do try to honor that in the times we're living in. And our goal is for everybody to feel comfortable, to feel safe, but also to bring folks together. So I just felt that I wanted to mention that too, because it is important, this whole concept of feeling heard and getting that feedback.
That's great, Dr. Z. I think that does summarize it well. I think those early parts of this policy that we talked about, bringing people into the conversation. I always view the role of this board as to help shine a light on what's going on in our schools. And I think that it would probably elevate this conversation, not to talk about the specter of the things that are actually going on, but when those situations come up, for parents to have a great communication with their building leader and with the district as a whole, to not talk about perception or talk about certainly, what's out there in the discourse, but talk about what's actually going on in the classroom. Talk about what the kids are experiencing. And you encapsulated very well what the board as a whole feels about that, which is that we should be an open place. We should be communicating with our parents and our families. and we should be helping everyone to understand what's actually going on in our classes and our classrooms at all levels. I think that would really help everyone come together.
I anticipate on the next reading that we're going to look at this.
Oh yes, when we're going to go, we'll have, so the way it works is we'll have another committee meeting now. We'll do some revisions, we'll do some research, and then there'll be the second read at the next meeting. I also want to use this as a shameless plug for our listening sessions, North Shore Journey, where these are the kinds of things we talk about, the specific concerns about not only curriculum, but also approaches about extracurriculars and topics like wellness. So sorry about that.
It's not a shameless plug. It's a great segue because if people have concerns, they should be bringing them to the schools and talking to the building leaders about those things.
And actually, we've discussed this policy a bunch of times, and Carol and Chris have shared a lot of examples of parents coming and really providing excellent insight into something that was missed. And that's sort of the goal of the whole thing, right? And I think the policy is set up to really highlight that. And I think it's great that you guys gave comments on everything, because this is what we do. We go back and we change it. It's way more, all these policies are way more complex to go through and way more time consuming to go through than you would think. I mean, we spend a lot of time together.
I'm just curious, how many trustees have served on the policy committee here? So you got it. He's coming up. Terrific. Any other comments on these policies that we've brought for this first reading? Okay, thank you, trustees. We will now open it up to comments from the public. There are some folks here, and I second what was said earlier, that we would love to hear from anyone here who has any thoughts on anything district related.
Hey everyone, my name is Gabrielle Menuza, Glenwood Landing parent of a third grader. I just actually had a follow-up question to this policy conversation. Is there a way someone could just walk us through like what the procedure specifically is, like in terms of what the committee is, like how the committee is formed, like where the parent would fit in with the committee and that kind of thing?
Dr. Z?
The committee, if there was a concern about curriculum material, so the way it would begin is that there would be an informal discussion with the principal or the supervisor of the building, of the grade level or the subject area, and then after that point, if it's not resolved, that's where the parent would then use that form that we're working on, and then the assistant superintendent for instruction would actually create that committee, formulate that committee with the guidelines that are in here. At that point, that committee would meet with the parent, and the parent would have that opportunity to talk with the committee. So it's not, and we talked about this in the policy committee, so it's not like second or third hand or just being like going off the piece of paper, but actually having a real, live conversation in the hopes to have, a better understanding. And then the process would follow in from there. But that's part of what we're talking about is like, is there another space for that? Or, with that, would you then close the loop with another conversation at the end, which is it right now, that's not written in. So that's kind of, being, worked on right now.
I wanted to add that part of the documents that you probably haven't seen yet is a particular questionnaire that's meant to draw out, to inform the conversation. So that's part of the process as well. We based it off of some other documents and personalized it to us, but it's meant to ask leading questions, and then it culminates with the meeting. Dr. Smythe is the one who chairs the committee, and she would pick the different people that she think would be pertinent to whatever the material is, whether it be grade level or subject area, and she, would chair the committee, and then the meeting would happen, and then ultimately she would make a recommendation to Dr. Z.
Questionnaire is attached
Oh, great.
as part of the agenda. I think the question was though, what's the composition of the committee? And I'm not sure I heard an answer to that question.
Well, I think I just answered it, which was,
Let's,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought the
There's a question. I
Yeah.
don't
yeah.
think
No,
I-
I'm sorry.
yeah,
I
I'm
thought
saying, well, Dr. Zeal.
I thought the question was what was the role of the parent in the committee and like how much interaction they had. I'm sorry if I misheard that question, but right now the way the policy reads, and again it's under review, is it would involve the assistant superintendent for instruction. It would involve just looking. I want to make sure I get the right answer. The committee, I'm just going to read it the way it is right now, consisting of the building principal, subject supervisor, 5 other faculty members, and so that's the language of it right now. Sometimes also, and later on, it says the committee can consult with other faculty or organizations, like for example, like the National Council of the Teachers of English or the National Council for the Social Studies. So the composition is teachers and a mix of those 5 teachers and then administrators as well.
I'll just say I even heard the question a little bit differently myself. I thought the question was a little bit about the policy committee itself. The board, the policies are board policies. So the policy committee is 3 trustees and the superintendent.
Sorry, I was asking like who makes up the review committee, not the policy committee.
Not the
but
policy, the
board.
review.
Yeah, yeah.
Great.
What Trustee Russo said was what I was
Okay.
basically
Okay.
asking. But also just like generally how the parents would fit into that process. But you answered that part of the question. But yeah, no, that was my question.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming
Thank
back
you.
up and clarifying.
Sorry.
Other comments from the public?
Hello, everybody. I'm Mike Conklin, president of the North Shore Athletics Booster Club and a resident of Greenville. The North Shore Athletic Booster Club is unwavering in its support of all things athletic in the North Shore School District. We will not be satisfied until we have facilities equal to or better than those we compete against. Understand our district's unique financial situation and appreciate the administration and board's hard work on this budget and Props 2 and 3. The North Shore Athletic Booster Club supports these efforts and all actions that improve our athletic programs and facilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Other comments? Just don't, you don't have to press, just start talking into it. The light will come on and you're on. No, we can't.
Oh,
Just
you have to
angle,
lean it closer.
just angle a little closer. If you start going, it'll catch you.
So good evening, everybody. For the first time, I actually have notes.
That's great. Just we are excited to hear them, but just your name and town of residence, please.
Katya Ramada, Glen Head.
Thank you.
So before I start with my 2 questions, comments, follow-ups, I just want to echo Trustee Russo on her comments on the policy. And as far as parents are concerned, now it's my clear understanding that the policy committee is only formed by the board. There is no parent involvement or even curriculum. I believe it's only the, administrators and teachers, which I mean, to some level I understand, because like we said, we don't want to dictate curriculum from the parents. But and I don't want to open a can of worms, but I think that it's almost like the way I'm seeing, and please don't take this the wrong way. I would not want to be sitting where you are, otherwise my name will be on the ballot, and it's not. But it's almost like the police policing itself. And I think from a parent standpoint, based on what's going on, DEI, and talks about Elisa Walters and videos, and all the parents are all, understanding that that's happening. and we're trying to be inclusive of everybody, how every child, and making, room for everybody to feel comfortable in school. So I think the parents are coming from a point where we feel that we need to be heard, and we want to, and Dr. Z and I had conversations about this. I think from a parent, we wanted to not follow the narrow path of stick to the curriculum, and not that I agree with everything being thought is what should be in the classroom, but let's stick to the facts, to the core curriculum, and some of what I call the fluff. Some of the parents may not necessarily want that being introduced in elementary level. It should be something that comes from the household. I mean, the same way that every child develops differently, every household, approaches certain subjects differently. And to give an example, and when my daughter's in 6th grade, she brought home a book, and I picked it up and I was reading, and she wasn't really into it, and I started reading the back of it, and I really didn't think it was appropriate. So I emailed the teacher and I said, this is a really dark subject. It talks about, self-mutilation and suicide. And I'm like, this is a happy, athletic 6th grader. I don't understand why she has to read this. And when I questioned, the teacher says we gave them an array of books. And I looked at all of them, and a lot of them had dark subjects. So the teacher did work with me. I never had to go escalate to different levels. She worked with me, and we were able to choose different books. But if I didn't pick up that book that day, I would not know that that wasn't appropriate for her. So it comes down to, how involved the parents are, right? 1. 2, the education your kid is getting has some to do with the curriculum, a lot to do with who's delivering the message. And I think that's one of the issues that we had in the past. And so I think Mary Ann mentioned, it's not what necessarily you're saying, but how you're delivering, and that it's being perceived by the kids in many different ways, right? So I'm just want to put that out there, because I think since you guys are doing the policies, and I know that's been addressed, but is there a way that maybe there is a chance that parents can be heard, in curriculum or in policies in the future? That's just one of my comments from tonight. So anyway, going back to what I came here for. 2 things. 1, 0 period. I'm asking the board again, now that the budget has been put through, if you guys are able to look at it. Is there a way that we can shift the schedule, the teachers, to allow 0 period for the students that unfortunately need extra curriculum support because they have an IEP and they need reading support or skills? And I don't know if this only applies for the middle school. I think the high school has a different schedule. It doesn't really necessarily apply to elementary because they get pulled out, pushed in, and all of that, right? So my whole issue, I should say, is my kid has an IEP and he gets extra support, and he's doing great, and I'm thankful for it.
I just want to interrupt. We get the gist of what you're doing, and we appreciate it, and it's helpful, but just probably less about individual kids.
Right.
Yeah.
So the kids that do need support, they need to be pulled out, right? They're not getting, they're doing that because they have to. It's the need, not a want. And because of it, they do not participate in the full curriculum. They do have to give up a language, music, or art. Not PE, because I know that's a state mandate, right? It's not fair. If we're talking so much about inclusion, those kids are being excluded from the fun classes, from electives in 7th and 8th grade. So it's not what can we do as a district to allow those students that already will have an extra long day, because perhaps those students have tutoring at home or have to come in at 7 for the 0 period, but at least allow them to interact with other friends in the fun classes. Mr. Foreign does a class in 7th grade that all the kids look forward to. I mean, it's booked every time, and some kids can't even get into it. Certain kids can get that. So that's one. And then it leads me to busing, because I know busing was an issue with the 0 period because of the timing of the school starts. Now, I'm sure all of you know there's been studies shown that high school students perform better when they start later. Some districts already started their classes later. Some states even are an hour later than when we already start, right? Since we own our own fleet and we control it, and I see that the budget has a 12.5% increase on the transportation department. I don't know exactly on the budget, and I'm sorry, I don't understand it. Where is that going? But is there a way that we can work in a way to facilitate that if we do create, oh, I shouldn't say with, when we create zero period, that we can allow those students to be bused if they have to. 7 through 12 have extra school sports. I don't know what the percentage of our student body participate in sports, but I understand it's a large part, which means some of those buses are coming home at 3 o'clock with maybe 20% of the students on the bus. So perhaps we can combine the 3 o'clock buses for middle school and high school to allow and shift the budget to then allow for late buses, not only for our students in middle school and high school, but also to the students that go, to neighborhood private schools. I mean, has anybody looked at any of that? Has any of that discussions come about in the budget?
Do you want to talk about bus movement?
Sure. So a big portion of, and I can, we can talk and I can give you more specific information on that, but a big portion of the increase in the transportation budget is for students who are not going to our schools. It's contract transportation for students who are going to private schools, students who are placed in private schools as part of the CSE process, or other kinds of contract transportation. And so it is another reminder that, it is a good thing to have our own transportation because the contract fees with this inflationary environment are going up much higher. But the exact questions that you're talking about, I did start to ask Olivia about last year. And Jamie and I have started to talk to Ms. Hall about this. It does go back to the private schools, though. Sometimes when you offer after-school buses, when you have your own buses, it has implications for what you'd have to offer to schools who go to students who go to private schools, and then we just want to watch the costs on that. So it can balloon costs, but it has come up. Other parents have brought it up as well. So we can sit down and we can go through more of the details of where we are on that. I do think, one thing we always talk about is our ridership and how our ridership is really lower. We want it to be higher. I've talked to the crossing guards at the middle school a lot, and they're big, very much in favor of having different start times. They've said to me, that's the best solution to this, Chris, so that is something that Mr. Glennon and I and Dr. O'Hara and Mr. Nelson talk a lot about, and all the traffic implications there. Aside from LIPA, that's our next big mountain that we're going to climb, is figuring that out. And I know a late start, other folks have talked about. There are a lot of implications of that in terms of workday and things. But of course, if that's what's best for our students, we're going to investigate it. The zero period, actually, Dr. Smythe and I were meeting with Dr. O'Hara this morning. He has some things he's working on with schedule to address that, how students aren't able to take those cycle electives if they have related services or extra support. So that is definitely on our radar. We're working on that right now. And then one thing I did want to just mention about the committees, just I'm kind of going backwards, is, for this year we had the Viking Community Committee, so we didn't have like a teaching and learning committee, an SEL committee. We kind of moved away from that for this year. We wanted some more functional committees. As we talk about committees on April 20th and also the North Shore Journey, one thing that I will present to the board is, how do we establish our committees to support the North Shore Journey? So we might see, again, a recommendation for more of a teaching and learning committee, and some of this feedback, there could be a space, for that we do bring back. I understand that was a bit of a loss this year, but there were specific things we wanted to accomplish. So we have the MTSS committee, which is like very technical, but it's a specific job that we have to get done. But I understand the loss of those open forums. I'm gonna make another plug, North Shore Journey, listening sessions. That's part of how I was trying to capture that, but I'll put that out there again for sure.
Did look when I was first on the board, and I was a proponent for increasing the mileage so that we got more buses on the road. We looked at different options, and finally, after a couple of years of looking at it, finally did happen so that we could transport more students. And we did look at a late bus, and we did not look at an early bus. I don't think we looked at a late bus, and it was cost prohibitive at the time, but you know, things have changed, and I think we're in a different economic environment that it's worth looking at again because as parents who work, I know if I didn't have a grandparent locally, my child could not be picked up from after school activities because both my husband and I do not work locally. So I think as you have more, because you have to, and with the cost of real estate and taxes, have more than one income. I think it's worth looking at again because it makes it very difficult for parents who work with their students to arrange for transportation home.
Chris, if you can get a staggered start and eliminate that traffic, they will build a statue for you. I mean, that is that's the holy grail here.
At your center of the middle school circle.
Oh, that'll put it
Okay,
all backwards again.
we want a parking lot up there.
Thank you. Thanks, Kathy.
Just one last comment,
Sure.
question actually, since we're talking about busing and private schools, do we have a number of how many kids are leaving 8th grade into 9th grade? Do we have an official number? Because I know it's from talking to parents, is larger than it normally has been. And I understand we don't have an exit interview right as part of our policy to understand why those students are leaving and how can we stop that from happening and what can we improve and understand it better.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It has come up in different forums. Actually, in our community budget forum, it came up this week. There was a really robust discussion on this. And I'm actually, the board has asked me to compile a little report, and it's come up. I think traditionally we haven't done the exit interviews just because we feel like that's a parent's domain, and we don't want to be too intrusive. But we could make it voluntary. That's one idea we talked about in the community budget forum. It is bigger than last year, but when I look at the 5-year projections so far, like going to the seniors, it's within range. The range I see is 25 to 40. I live in a neighboring community. I can tell you that this cohort has more students going to private school in several communities. 8th grade is a little bigger. I know because of the nature of what this 8th grade cohort has endured, starting middle school during a difficult COVID return year and hybrid or alternate schedules and being cohorted in certain ways. I think, we're looking for, is there a reason? I think that maybe there is a piece there. And then of course that we were talking about this at this committee, you have parents who, they went to Chaminade, their grandfather, their parents went to Chaminade, so it's like a 4th, 5th generation thing. So that you have those students who will go, no matter what. But of course, we want to know if there's a reason. We also do have students who come back. They go for a couple of years, they do come back. So I'm trying to get those numbers as well. But right now, we don't have final numbers. We have a number of students who've said they might be going, who were accepted, by the February 1st deadline. And we're now actually transportation. That's where you get that final information. So I am going to be working with transportation office to see those April 1st requests when they come in to make sure that'll give us more of a final number. So I'm working on that. Hopefully by the 20th of April, our next meeting, I'll have more information on that. And the next Booster Club meeting, because I know they asked me too.
Thank you. Other comment? Oh, thank you.
You got me there? Lisa Vizigline Head. Thank you for the very robust discussion about this, the curricular concern policy. When you go back to have, I guess, an extended, amended conversation about it as you're finalizing the policy, think about teacher autonomy in the conversation. I don't believe we have scripted instruction at North Shore. I would never want it to be that. So I just kind of wanted to insert that into your thinking. Maybe in elementary school, we have units of study and everything is workbooks and whatever you do. But when you get to the secondary level, it's so important, and Rich might agree, every educator brings some level of fabulous professionalism in heart into what they're teaching, and I would hate that to be attacked. Not saying that parent concerns are attacks, they're not. I don't want the teachers to feel that. I don't want our special educators to feel that. So that's just my comment on that conversation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Other comments from the public before we close public comment? Right. Okay. We will close public comment. Thank everyone for coming tonight. Oh, you're certainly all welcome to stay. There's more to go. But we will move on to action item 14, which are some personnel issues. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Thank you. And a second I got. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. Action 15, which is a resolution on the annual district budget vote and election, of course, on May 16th, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Is there a motion? Thank you. And I heard a second. Any comments or questions? Look forward to everyone voting. All in favor? Aye. Action 16, which is the acceptance of 2 donations, one from the Glen Head PTO and one from the North Shore Athletics Booster Club. Is there a motion? Second I heard. Any comments or questions?
Thank you. Donations.
Thank you.
So I echo that. I did have a question, actually. One of the donations from the Booster Club for some benches for the softball field, the varsity softball field that is closest to the shack. And I just had a question there. One of those benches, the first base side, there's some pretty consistent puddling and mud that seems to live there permanently. If we're going to be putting in new benches there, that's just something that could be looked at.
Will do. Yep.
The comments or questions? All right. Thank you very much to those organizations. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Action 17 to approval to dispose of some inventory. All in favor? Oh, sorry. A motion, please. Thank you. And I heard a second. Any comments or questions on the disposal of inventory? Favor? Aye. Action 18, which is the establishment of the North Shore Before-After Scholarship Fund to be awarded annually to one high school senior who plans to attend a 4-year college or university. Is there a motion? And I heard a motion over here, second over here. I wouldn't mind just briefly, I know some questions came up. The question was, is it a student at large? Is something about the interest of that student that will make them eligible for this? And how will it be funded?
Thank you. Yeah, so actually Michael Lynch from North Shore Before-After School Care approached Mr. Pappas with this as an idea. And it would be awarded, funded annually by the aftercare program, which is technically separate from the North Shore schools, although it serves us. And it would be given to a student who's entering the field of education or special education.
Those are my and other folks' questions. Any other questions before we take the vote? All in favor? Exciting. Thank you to Before After School program. Action 19, approval of some change orders. Is there a motion? And a second? Any comments or question on these?
Just comment really briefly. These go through construction steering also. Do you guys actually review this stuff before it comes before the board? I was just curious, but I thought it was interesting, again, looking at Jamie's excellent backup material, that at first I thought, gosh, there's a lot of change orders, and then I started looking at all the detail and realizing that in quite a number, some not insignificant number of instances, we're actually using credits that were change orders before they should have been, I guess. That this is not new money. This is actually money that came back prematurely and is appropriately now being used.
There are contingencies that hopefully will not be realized. Someone should open up a wall, and there's just nice, clean space between the studs, and you're all good. I think the answer to your question is when it's relevant to other topics we're discussing, it does come up and we discuss those changes. But on some of these that are more specific, the board sees more backup than the committee.
I don't actually think we really look at the dollar amounts. That's what I was going to say. The specific change order, the topics of what might cause a change order are discussed, but the change orders themselves are not reviewed by construction steering.
Right. At the last meeting, John Hall made reference to some work that was being done, and he said the board will be seeing some change orders on that at its next meeting. So it's referenced, but Marion's right, not gone through like this. Okay. Any other questions? All in favor? Aye. Action 20, approval of an intermunicipal cooperative transportation agreement. Is there a motion? And a second? Comments, questions?
Thank you for the additional information that I asked for.
Andrea, all in favor? Aye. Action 21, approval of 3 special education contracts. Motion? Thank you. And a second? Comments? Discussion? Vote. All in favor? Aye. And finally, number 20, we got everyone, Betty? I'm sorry. Action 22, the approval of a health services agreement between North Shore and POB. Is there a motion? Thank you. Thank you again, Rich. Any other comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. Board committee reports. That's, as usual, thorough and succinct.
Go.
I have wellness and athletic advisory. I don't know if you want me to. I can, if I forget anything, I'm thinking you guys will jump in, right? So for wellness, I think we met twice since we last gave board committee updates on January 23rd and February 13th. We discussed the fish taco day, which was amazing, and we've talked about it here, so I won't go into more detail, but that was wonderful. Dan Doherty talked about working with Julie Glickman on sessions for students to de-stress with midterms back at the pre-pandemic levels. We discussed study tips and organizational tips, or that's what she was working on in coping and studying skills. We talked about the middle school PS I Love You Week, focusing on coping skills and wellness. We talked about the Chris Herron presentation, and mental health and administration from each building attended a threat assessment training, and continuing discussion of nutrition and fresh food, including Farm Fresh Thursday program. And we also discussed Chromebooks for our youngest learners and reevaluating the necessity for that. Andrea, did I miss anything?
And in terms of thorough and succinct, 10. Thank you.
Anybody else want to go before I do athletic advisory, or should I?
I would say keep it.
You're on a roll.
Keep going.
All right, and then Rich and Marianne can jump in if I forget anything here. We talked about the Chris Herron, and we also met twice. We met February 13th and March 13th. We talked about the Chris Herron presentation, talked about AEDs, since that's, been talked about so much, and we have 30 throughout the district and multiple in each building. Coaches travel with them, and all the coaches are trained. They're brought to practices as well. We talked about the middle school bleacher getting fixed, sports night on March 2nd. We also, at this last meeting, looked at, which you talked about, Dr. Z, we looked at the athletic review from 2015 and 16, talked about looking at our policies, handbooks, other documents related to athletics. And we, talked a lot about making sure students weigh in on the process and are part of all the meetings because their voice is so important and valuable. We talked about uniforms, and now we're using uniforms that are easier to replace to make the process better. And Dr. Z gave updates on the sign and the Capital Reserve at the last meeting.
We also talked about revitalizing the captain's committee, the student portion. That when we had there was recommendations in the athletic review, and we've sort of merged all those committees together, and we talked about what way we might think about reorganizing the athletic advisory committee, and specifically reviving the committee of students, a captain's council, but I don't think that's the name it was given.
We did look at some what other districts do, what they call it, and we talked about how they could work with younger students as well as be representatives. The struggle that we brought up, I think actually Trustee Russo brought up, they're so busy, they're doing so much, and so how do we make the time? So some of the recommendations that we give on the 20th for this committee will take all of that into account.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Other committee work,
I can report on LAC.
please.
Okay. Our big highlight that we've been working on in the 2 meetings since the last reports is legislative night, which has been targeted pretty much according to the calendar of our legislators, and the only day on the school calendar that was available as April 27th at 8 p.m., not the usual 7 p.m., but 8 p.m., just to try to accommodate those who might be going to the high school choral concert the same night. It will be right here in this auditorium. We will have Assembly Persons Levine, Blumenkranz, County Legislators Lafazan and DeRigi Witten, and we're hopeful that Senator Martins will be able to attend. He has not yet confirmed, but we're still hoping he can. Chris, did you want
I
to
was just
answer?
going to say I need to follow up on that. I will follow up on that.
I know our lobbyist is trying to stay on top of it as well. So, and I do want to mention, because we're all cognizant of the work DHC is doing, that they have actually been, she's been very helpful with getting this all organized and making sure that they're paying attention to us. And want to encourage the board in particular, but also the community as well. It's just that they're not here and maybe not listening anymore. But if they are, to submit questions to lac@northshoreschools.org for anything and everything you can think of that we would like our legislators to address. We are also at the, I'm sorry, Rich, were you going to say something? Okay. Finally, the other big highlight is the issue of borrowing from our reserves that the board has discussed at its last 2 meetings, and we talked about it at our last meeting, and 2 committee members have been assigned who are, I think, going to take some good bites out of it. They will meet with Jamie as soon as possible. I was a little delayed on that one. Making that introduction, but they'll get going on that, and I think we'll have something good to report, I hope. We are aware that there are other districts sort of struggling and interested in the same problem, so we have also discussed the possibility of a coordinated effort. And everything else is just, plugging along. So unless there are questions about that, I'll go on to district-wide safety. Rich and I are going to team together.
Me too. Don't forget about me. I'm on it.
Heavy on the left side.
Sorry,
That's
that's right.
good.
Andrea.
We had our last meeting on the 15th, and there really isn't a lot of new.
You want notes? I have notes.
I can't read. So.
Do you want me to do it, or you want?
Yeah, you
All
can
right.
do that.
All right. So our main focus really is the district-wide safety plan, and we're supposed to have a public hearing on June 8th about that. So those plans are being looked at. They're incorporating the UPK into the building-wide plan, not the district-wide plans. The UPK programs are following our procedures in general, and the schools have done a very nice job sort of acclimating the little ones to like our fire drills and things like that in a developmentally appropriate way. We talked about the construction a little bit, about the summer work, the ventilation. We have a new bid date, and there's a 2025 deadline for the new lead water requirements, and we look like we're going to make that. Cameras on buses is still being sorted out, unfortunately. And we also talked about adding stickers to the student ID cards on the back with like important numbers like the new mental health hotline or the national hotline for suicide prevention. And that's a movement that is actually happening in other states, which is a law, actually, believe it or not. And in New York State, there's a pending law on that. So it would be nice to sort of get ahead and be one of the first schools in New York to do something like that.
I will do construction. Thank you guys very much for the report, but also for the work, of course. Construction steering. I'm launching right in. There was discussion that when we were going to install the solar panels at the high school, it was discovered that there was some blistering on a subroof that is outside the warranty. Infrared testing revealed the extent of that, and the proposal will be made to repair that before the placement of those solar panels. The phase one bond work is moving forward with closeouts at all the different buildings, mostly punch list items. Phase two listed some programs. As usual, construction steering is a mix of exciting good news and some somewhat debilitating, not so great news sometimes, but especially in this environment for construction. But for summer of 22, that work that was done, the high school summer work, is really a punch list. The dust collection system at the shop area has now all been moved externally. There was some discussion, and I drove by this the other day, but those units are very large and very front and center. So there will be some fencing, and then beyond that, some landscaping that will hopefully shield as much of that as possible, because it is on the Glen Cove Ave viewing spot. And the goal is to get that done. Hopefully, one more month, and that can all be operating. The students are there, but it's a very delicate process because the metalworking dust and woodworking dust can create a problem in terms of flammability. So that's got to be worked on. The elementary school libraries are moving ahead right now. I believe none of these are fixed dates, but a goal would be to be able to do a substantial amount of the work to a point of completion by the end of the April breaks as a goal, so the kids could return and try to use some of those buildings for their final years, for the final portion of the year. The summer of 23, there's a lot of work going on in the high school front entry. The goal is to have that ready for the new year, so we can have the students going through the front door, not everyone wrapping around through the gym. The high school interior work, all the stuff around the new reformatted area outside of the auditorium, the bathrooms, etc. Hopefully by mid-August, that should hopefully be wrapped up. The high school music wing is a question. Ideally, we would love that to be completed for opening, but I wouldn't hold my breath, I guess. The answer, we'll see. We'll certainly hope, but to be determined. And there are some issues that I won't get into the specifics of because they're contractual, but there's some work that is still needed to be hammered out that has not been completed in the timely basis that the district is working to remediate and to try to move forward with. But there is progress being made, especially in those libraries. Hopefully, we'll get some books on the shelves in that April break. The track, we talk a lot, of course, about the turf, but the track is something else that's of concern, and it was, as Trustee Russo pointed out at this meeting, it was extended from the initial installation because it was replaced a couple of years later, 3 if I remember correctly. So there'll be a representative from the installing company to come out and inspect, do some repairs as soon as our spring track season is over, and that's a funded and ready project. The softball field at the middle school has been completed, and I understand the grass is taken. So the students will be playing there hopefully on Monday, which is very, very exciting for them. The Glen Head Portable, which is covered by insurance, though it's a prefabricated structure. The old one was demoed this week, I believe, and hopefully mostly removed, and the new one will be going in. And that is my report.
Just wanted to add, Dave, on the roof, we're repairing the high school roof with the repair reserve.
That the energy performance contract continues to yield positive results and is giving back already, and there's money being refunded to the district based on the efficiencies that we're getting there. And there was an update on the sign. and that there's positive movement and a projected actual time that this could be installed in our lifetime.
Okay, other committee reports. Thank you, everyone. We will move on to unfinished business.
An item of unfinished business. And this is something that maybe DHC can help us out with. The Electric Generation Facility Cessation Mitigation Fund, which is a fund for districts who have lost their power supply plants where they've been given funding. And we initially looked at it a couple of years back. We were not eligible because we could go within the time period. There was some pending legislation, I believe, proposed by Senator Flanagan to expand that time period. From what I've read, it seems to be fully funded at this point. I just don't know what the status is of the bill that was going to expand the time period allowable, which would potentially allow us to get some money from that fund.
We had discussed this at the lobbying day, and we learned a little bit more about it. And it's not a fund that's been fully funded. It's line items that receive reappropriations every year, specifically for those districts. And I believe the best way to characterize it as, it's not the most optimistic thread. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it was disappointing when we went to the lobbying day in January. It was our number one item. I can produce some more specific explanation and backup as to what we received from multiple meetings asking about this. But indeed is not a fund that is sitting there, and so there are bigger issues beyond the timeline that would qualify us. There are actually other issues about the fund itself and the status of it.
Well, could we do this? Could we follow up with DHC about expanding the timeline so that we qualify that bill, so that if there is money in there, that we're ready to queue up?
Feedback from the legislators that we met with across the board was that it was a non-starter for various reasons. That it wasn't just as simple as changing the timeline. That it was due to the whole construct of the way the bill was set up. That it just, we certainly can keep pushing it, but the sense we got was very clearly that it was barking up the wrong tree.
I just think it's something that's out there, and I know you maybe have got negative news, but we have never let that stop us before. And if there's any, we always talk about new revenue sources. So even if we couldn't get that expanded, maybe there is something else that can be done. We're not the only district that's in this position. So, we had talked about the days when we had Superlap. Would it be possible if we got places like Northport and Huntington and Port Jefferson and Island Trees? There are a lot of districts that have undergone this. And if there are districts that were supposed to get the money, like up in Westchester County, right? Not Broadcliff, the other one. Oh no, I know the name of the facility, the name of the district that was really.
Hudson?
There was a district that was impacted just recently. It will come to me. Will come to me later. In the Mount Kisco area, Bedford schools also lost a power supply that negatively impacted them. So there are other schools that are in the same districts that are in the same position. So if this fund is the bill that is currently there and the fund that is currently there is not benefiting these districts, then maybe there is power in numbers, right? And isn't it worthwhile to look at Bedford and the one that you talked about in Westchester and Indian Point and, Shoreham and all the, sure it's a little far out, but Port Jeff island trees, all of us working with our different legislators, maybe then you would have a little bit more power. It's certainly something to look at. Because if this is not doing what it was supposed to do, then there should be some other bill or some other fund proposed to help all of these districts. And there are some upstate too that I can't even think about. I only know Westchester, but there are some beyond that have lost power plants in, the northernmost regions.
Love the can-do attitude. Why don't we get a summary from the administration in consultation with DHC and where it last left off, so we know where the stopping point was and what the specific obstacles were, and then we can think about regrouping and trying to attack it from another angle. Great. Other unfinished business?
I do. I'm going to put it under unfinished business. In the past, I had mentioned that when we're looking at these service providers that were given their license number, I was thinking a little bit more about it, and I do think we should be tightening up our procedures in terms of who we're contracting with, who's presenting in our schools. I think it would be really beneficial if the board members were given at least CVs, because the CV would have license numbers if they're licensed. It would have background information so that we understand what their experience and profession is. It would link to websites, because what I think is happening, or at least what I'm doing, is I'm trying to research it on my own, and it's first of all taking up a lot of time, but I'm trying to put it all together. And I'm not sure if I'm landing on the right websites with the right people. I think if we're approving contracts, particularly contracts with individuals who are going to be with our students, whether that is through special education or whether that it's presenting on some topic, like I want to have more information on what I'm voting for and who I'm voting to be with our kids. And it doesn't seem like it's that complicated. I'd have to believe that whatever department is seeking this contract, I would hope they're reviewing some type of CV. So to just attach that in board docs, I think would be really helpful. I think we normally, typically do a very good job with who we bring in. I think maybe sometimes we don't get it right. And in an effort to continually sort of upgrade how we do things, elevate, I think this might be a good idea.
Agree, Andrea. I think we've probably file it under the small p policy, which also stands for procedures. But I think it'll be very helpful for the board. I think it'll also be helpful for the community in continuing efforts to be as transparent as we can be. Thank you. Other unfinished business? I was looking at our policies on non-discrimination, and while they are appropriately voluminous, they don't cover non-discrimination based on political beliefs. There's been some talk out there about not North Shore, but other districts where political beliefs may have been a factor in the way districts operate and or hire folks. I'm wondering if we can ask council if it makes sense to explicitly state that we do not discriminate on the basis of political beliefs. Is there precedent? Is it legal? That would be something I'd be interested to learn more about.
Absolutely, I can ask them.
I want to also ask Becky if it's more particular, like party allegiance or registration. Because I don't know how we wouldn't ask a candidate about political beliefs, so it would have to be something that would be posted or.
Well, the situation that occurred in
published.
another district, not ours, is that there was a higher level administrator who allegedly was on video saying that they were discriminating against people that they perceived to be conservative, and we're not hiring people for that reason. And that is something that when I look through our policies, we would not want that to be the case. And so adding that to the long list of reasons why we would not discriminate, I think might bring some comfort to people in the community to know that we have a variety of people with a variety of different beliefs here, and they're hired based on their qualifications to do the job and what they contribute to the district, and not barred for any reason.
I just don't know how you would kind of get to that. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, like when you talk about, you know, gender or race or
All the protected
oh,
classes. Yeah.
all the protected classes, it's identifiable, right? So political beliefs would not be. It's an impermissible area of inquiry that would not necessarily be apparent. I guess you could do a background check and see where they're registered. That's why I was
Or I think
suggesting
yeah.
it might be.
Yeah.
That you might find out that, you know, that might be a protected class. I'm just not sure political beliefs is a protected class and how that would be done. I mean, I understand where you're going, but I'm just thinking out loud as
I
as
think
an attorney.
What I was thinking was, I mean, for example, like weight is not a protected class, but we say we don't discriminate on the basis of that. That, of course, is, for the most part, very, very, very apparent. My thought would be, and I agree with you completely, it's more a theoretical question of how we would proceed, how we would proceed would be the details. But in this world of social media, I think, people post their beliefs about things. A teacher candidate could post something about their political beliefs in a particular site, and we would not want to think that that person would or wouldn't be eligible for employment here based on their free political expression. Taking it to extreme, obviously you don't want members of a registered hate party. There are exceptions, and that's why I would think about what legal would say.
Should ask the 7th graders because this was their homework tonight.
What do you mean?
It was this very question, freedom of speech and both sides of the coin.
I just think political beliefs is a very nebulous area.
I think it's nebulous in part because political beliefs are fluid, right? And if you look at it in terms of political parties, people are a lot less fitting into one party. More people are sort of, you're sort of all over the place based upon the different areas, right? Like socially, fiscally, right? Your beliefs about infrastructure, all these different things. So I think it's easy to categorize people in terms of what they are, but I think actually if you look deeper, they don't fit into those categories. So
I'm not arguing that point.
Yeah.
I'm just arguing
No, I know you're
when
not.
you're talking about a protected class.
Yeah. No,
You
no.
have to have a means to identify a protected class. And I'm not sure that just saying political beliefs is going to fit in there. Just a suggestion that you might want to ask them, how could it be modified? And one suggestion would be, if we needed something more concrete, would be party allegiance, political party allegiance. I think political beliefs is going to be.
Let's see if they have any precedent for it. If they've ever encountered this before. I think there is an incorrect perception among probably a small number of folks that public education institutions don't have a wide variety of political beliefs among the people that work there. I think we know that is certainly true based on the folks that we interact with and based on various situations that come before us. But I think putting in there explicitly conceptually. So yes, I think we're in agreement. Let's find out if they've ever encountered, as an initial inquiry, have you ever encountered anything like this before as a potential explicit way of letting our community know that we are not looking for all X or all Y. We're looking for fantastic teachers, music teachers, custodians. We're looking for great people.
I did want to add, I know we had the presentation of our internal audit that dealt with personnel, procedures, policies, and things like that. So we do have a hiring protocol in place, and we're reworking and looking at all of that. So, I think at some point, certainly I think the board has probably seen that at some point in the last couple of years, but we can, look at the revisions and show those to you. And so that's another way to illuminate the process that's just so focused on, for teachers, I'll just speak specifically about teachers focused on the quality of instruction and the ability to help students grow. But, that process will, I think, show that too.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And it's helpful, my fellow trustees. Any other new business? All right, thanks everyone. Motion adjourned. Meeting adjourned. Motion adjourned. Meeting adjourned.